Hey guys, Kirk here, and thank you for joining me on a new video on the channel. In this video we are going to be looking at runtime virtual textures and how to apply it to our landscape and our landscape material. The main reason for using runtime virtual textures is to support the performance of our landscape and our landscape shader. You don't have to use runtime virtual textures, but it is advised to, especially on massive open world landscapes like this. As it, like I say, does save a lot on performance when it comes down to your landscape shader. As it stands now, we've got a massive open world here, what we've created over the duration of this series. And now it's at a stage where our shader's not that complex, but it is hogging a lot of performance. There's a very good reason for that, and I'll explain shortly why that is. The main telltale sign of where your landscape shader is quite heavy on your landscape is if we come to the top here to lit, we click on lit, come to optimization view modes and then shader complexity. You can see the shortcut is Alt A. I do that, but I use NVIDIA Shadow to record, and NVIDIA Shadow Play uses a lot of the Alt and F keys. So I'm not going to do that right now, I'll just click on it. So I'm just going to click shader complexity. You may not showcase it straight away, but it will take a bit of time. It might be black and grey checkerboard for now, but let it build and it'll compile the shaders. As you can see, it is bright red, our sky is green. From the toolbar at the bottom, you can see here, it gives you a bit of a, what should we call it, tooltip of how complex your shader is. As you can see, the landscape is red, and that's due to our shader being very complex. Even though the shader is not complex, but like I say, I'll let you know about that shortly. But as it stands now, it's quite a reddish, it's almost going to red, to a brighter red if you like. And if you use the tooltip bar at the bottom, you can see here that ours is in between this PS and bad. Ours is around there. At parts here, you're seeing it's starting to go a little bit tiny pinkish. Obviously, you can see little bits there that are pink. That's the river shader I've got going on over there. But yeah, this is a telltale sign of how heavy your shader is on the performance of your machine. We come out of there because it's sending my eyes crazy. So what we need to do is reduce that so it's green, and you can do that with runtime virtual textures. So how it works with our landscape shader applied to this landscape right now, at the moment our engine is applying that information of our landscape shader to the landscape itself every frame throughout the entire time we've been viewing this screen. So that's what makes it so complex, because the engine is constantly dragging information from our landscape shader and applying it to the landscape. So it's, like I say, doing that every frame. With runtime virtual textures, what it's doing is it's dragging the information from your landscape shader, applying it to a runtime virtual texture, and then that runtime virtual texture applies it to the landscape. So essentially the runtime virtual texture is storing the information, and then when the landscape needs it, it will call on that runtime virtual texture to apply that shader to the landscape itself. Doing it that way, with you storing the information of your shader instead of updating every frame, when you're storing that information, you're saving a lot on computer power, which then makes it a lot more easier on performance, if you like. Okay, so now that's just a brief description of what runtime virtual textures are. What we're going to do now is apply it to our landscape and our landscape material. The first things you need to do, guys, is to come to your project settings. So you can get this two ways. You can go to edit at the top here, and you can go your project settings, or on your screen you'll see you have a settings tab at the top right. Just click on that and you've got project settings there as well. We just go ahead and click on that. What we need to do is scroll down on this bar on the left hand side and look for rendering. We click on rendering tab, And you'll see if we scroll down here a little bit, you'll see we've got a category here, virtual textures. Let's close this up a bit so we can pretty much see what we're doing. Right, so I don't know why I've had to do this, guys, but I like to do it anyway. Anyway, let's carry on. So we've got this category here, virtual textures. We've got enable virtual texture support. This is telling our engine that we want to be able to use virtual textures if we want to. This will enable the engine to have virtual textures and virtual texture volumes. That's what this is going to do. Beneath that, you have enable virtual texture on texture import, and once you import a texture from, say, outside the engine or Quixel Bridge or something like that, if this is checked, it will make that texture a virtual texture. So if you've got an issue with your virtual textures saying VT on them, but you don't want virtual textures, it's probably this. There is another way you could disable it in the texture itself, but I'll showcase that a little bit later on. But for now, we're just going to enable virtual texture support, and then it will ask you to restart the engine. There will be some compile time, so you will have to wait. So I'd recommend restarting your engine, depending on the power in your engine, in your PC. Restart your engine, go and grab a coffee or something, and pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, so once that is done, we've now got the ability to apply virtual textures to our landscape. I'm going to create a folder first. I'm going to come to the content drawer. As you can see, I'm already in the important folder. This is our folder structure throughout the series. If we just click on our build worlds, important, or you just find somewhere where you want your virtual textures to be, completely up to you. I'm going to right click in here and get a new folder. Call this RVT. I apologise if you hear banging every now and again. That's my arm banging on the microphone. So apologies for that. We're going to open this folder up, and we need to create a couple of virtual textures in here. I'm going to right click, and I think it's not material. In UE4, Unreal Engine 4, it used to be in here, but now they've put it in this textures tab, where if you come to the textures bit, you'll see we've got runtime virtual texture, and I'm going to call this RVT material. So RVT material, like so. We can go ahead straight away and left control and D, duplicate that, and we're going to change this name. We'll change this to height, and click away, and there we go. Okay, so now we've got two runtime virtual textures. One is height and one is material. So essentially, these are the textures, what I was talking about earlier, where they store the information of our landscape shader and apply it to the landscape itself. I'll describe what it's doing best I can as we go through the tutorial. But essentially, the material is going to store the colour information of our landscape, and the height is going to store the height information of our landscape. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to open the RVT here, material, texture, and you'll see here we've got a virtual texture content. What I like to do, this is completely up to you, but it's just a personal preference, is just come down here and you've got YCOCG. Essentially, these two are the same, but one is a bit more on quality than the other. So this is just your standard, the base color, normal, roughness and specular, whereas you get YCOCG, base color, normal, roughness and specular. This is a bit more higher quality, so I'm going to select that. You've got size of virtual texture in tiles and size of each virtual texture tile. So essentially what this is once you apply virtual textures to your landscape, it's going to create a tile in which that virtual texture sits and applies the data when needed, and you can increase or decrease the amount of tiles you're using. The higher this goes, the more quality you get, but the more of a performance hit you get as well. But for now, I'm going to leave it left like that. You can increase it, so if I increase this to maximum, you'll see I'm getting a 4K virtual texture, and if I increase this to 1K, we're getting a 1K tile size, which our 4K texture sits in. So I'm just going to reset these back to default, and reset all So there you go. We're just going to leave it like that for now. If I want to, I can come in here later on and increase the quality. That's our landscape shader. We'll come back to the folder. We're going to go to height. Similar place, the drop down menu to the material RVT. We just click this, but we're just going to choose world height because we just want this to store our height information of our landscape. You could also do this as well, increase the quality, but you don't really need to with a height information virtual texture, but that's up to you. Okay, so now we've got our textures in here. They're ready to take all the information. What we need to do now is apply some virtual texture volumes. So if I come to this little plus icon at the top, and we're just going to come to all classes. I can't remember really where they are, to be honest. We'll just come to all classes. You can see here actually, yeah, but we'll do it this way because you may not see that. If you just hover over the all classes and just start typing runtime, and you'll see it'll give you a runtime virtual texture volume. Just click and hold and drag it into your scene like so. If I come to the outliner, you'll see our runtime virtual texture volume is there. What I'm going to do first is just click on it so it's highlighted. Press F2. I'm going to type RVTV for runtime virtual texture volume dash material. Like so. And now that's created, I'm going to left control, oh wait there, let me highlight it again, left control and D, and just duplicate it, press F2 and change the name. And I'm going to change this to height. And what these volumes are going to do, they're going to hold our virtual textures. We're going to apply them to these individual volumes. And once we do that, these virtual texture volumes, this is the way our textures are applied to the landscape. It communicates with the landscape. So if we select these two, I'm going to drag them into our landscape folder, like so. And now that's set up, we need to tell our landscape to be able to receive the information from our virtual texture volumes. So if we click on landscape, don't change the name, just click on landscape. I'm going to hit the details tab here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit and you'll see we've got our virtual textures here. And we just need to hit this little plus icon so we can add an array of information. And we're going to need two of these, one for the material and one for the height. And essentially you could just simply click and hold and drag them in, but because I have these closed down tabs, because I do prefer to see what I'm doing, what I can essentially do is click on landscape again, come to details, and where we see these, if I just click the drop down menu, you'll see I've got my my textures here. Sorry, my mind went blank. So I'm going to hit material for that one, just let it build into there, and then we're going to hit the one below it and we're going to put the height one in there. Right, so as it stands, we've created our runtime virtual textures, we've applied the virtual texture volumes to our landscape, or to our scene if you like, and now we've applied our virtual textures to our landscape itself. So now whatever information we're going to put into this runtime virtual texture height and material is going to communicate into our virtual texture volumes, and then our landscape is going to drag the information for them volumes into the landscape itself. But we need to set the bounds of our virtual texture volumes. As you can see here, it's just a little pivot in the middle. What we need it to do is encompass the whole landscape. So to do this, we need to tell our virtual texture volumes what landscape it needs to apply the information to. You can easily do that by selecting the volume itself, go into details, and in the bounds align actor, we hit the drop down menu. You'll see we have a landscape here. Just click on that, and now our landscape is applied into there. If we just go ahead and select our height as well, and do the same thing in the bounds align actor, select the landscape, and you'll see we do need to set the size of our volumes, but you can't quite do it just yet. Just hang on a hot second. Well, there's a good reason for that, which I forgot to indicate. So our landscape has got our RVT material and height texture in it. We also need to apply that same texture into our volumes as well, so that they're all communicating together basically. So I'm going to come to the material, click on details, and in the virtual texture area we're going to click the drop down and apply this. This is our material volume, so we're going to apply our material virtual texture to that. And as you can see now, we can set the bounds of our volume. So if I hit this, you'll see it looks like it's disappeared, but it hasn't. Well, I hope it's not. If I hit G, oh, there you go. G on the keyboard is what hides and unhides selected things on your landscape or in your scene in general. Okay, so that's our material. I'm going to click on height, and we're going to apply that height virtual texture to this height volume and set our bounds here as well. Now if we turn around, it looks like our volume's all messed up, but it really isn't. If we move out of here now, let's just speed this up a bit. If I move out, you'll see that volume's there. This is our landscape, and this orange box that you're seeing on the screen now are our virtual texture volumes. As you can see, they're encompassing our landscape, which is exactly what we want. Now we've got it set up where we've got a couple of virtual textures, which is our material and our height. We've got our virtual texture volumes set up, which are encompassing our landscape, and we've also applied these virtual textures to both the volumes and the landscape itself. I'm going to hit save here, because you always want to save whenever you can, because at any moment your engine can crash, so it's always a good thing to save. And now, like I said, we've applied our virtual textures to a landscape, so now our landscape, our volumes are now taking information from these virtual textures. But now we need to apply the information of our landscape material to these virtual textures. So if you navigate to where your landscape shader is, mine's up here at the top already open, you'll see this is the shader. We've been working on this for the past few videos in this series, particularly in the last video where we corrected a lot of wrongs in the shader, and now it works. So if you've not seen the last video and you're interested in making worlds like this, then check the whole series out. It'll be worth your while. But anyway, let's create some information in this landscape shader where we can tell our virtual textures what our landscape shader is made of. Okay, so first things first, we need to create an output using runtime virtual textures. So if we right click anywhere on the graph and just type runtime, you'll see we've got a load of options for runtime virtual textures, and what we need is the runtime virtual texture output. And what information this needs is our base color, specular, roughness, normal and world height, opacity and masks. Okay, if you want to use opacity, like make holes in your landscape and all that. The only information we need particular for this tutorial and this landscape is base color, specular, roughness, normal. We will be using the world height, but I'll create some logic for that myself. What I need to do now is to get the information for this output from our landscape shader. So use the last output node from your landscape, and what I mean by that is this is the actual output for the landscape shader. You should have one yourself, but this is it. If you don't, yours may look like make material attributes. Yours may look like that, where you've applied your color, your metallic and all this. That's completely fine if you want to do that. I'll showcase the way you can do it a bit later on if you've applied your output is still like this. Okay, so we're going to get our material information, so we're simply going to drag off this layer blend or whatever your last node is for your landscape shader, and just type, what is it, get material attributes, and we're essentially getting our material information now with this node. And what I need is our base color. So if I click on get material attributes, hit that, you'll see I get a base color. I need specular, so I'm going to hit the plus again in the details panel and click the drop down menu and choose specular. I'm going to hit the plus again. We need roughness. We'll select roughness there. Hit the plus again. What do we need? Normal. And we just need the normal information. So now essentially we could just apply the base color to our base color output, specular, the roughness, and the normal. I do need to tell this runtime virtual texture our world height for our runtime virtual texture height. Texture, that was a mouthful. But I'm not going to grab the height information from here. I'm going to give it its own world height information. So I'm going to right click and just type world. And what I need is an absolute world position node. This is going to get the information of our world information in the scene itself. But all I need to do, because virtual textures are like landscape materials, they're applied vertically downwards onto a landscape. So I just need to get the Z offset. If I come back here, you'll see I've got a little thing at the bottom left. The blue is the Z offset, so I just need to get the downwards application of our shader for this. So for this you could drag off the absolute world position node and get a component mask right there. Or for the shortcut, press click on the grey and press Shift and C. It will give you a component mask as well. Okay, so like I said, I just need the Z axes. And like I've shown before, I may zoom the camera in because I highly doubt you can see that. The Z offset, the Z axis is blue, and this component mask is represented that way by red, green, and blue. So we check the blue and uncheck the green and red because we don't need the X and Y axes. We just need the Z. We simply drag that into the world height of our virtual texture output, and that's that set up. We've got our output set up now. It's getting the information. Now we need to tell the actual output of our landscape shader what is in this information here. So the simple way to do that is right click and just type runtime again. And we just need the runtime virtual texture sample. This is going to apply this information into this virtual texture, and it's just for the color information. This is accepting color information and height information, but we need to apply the color information into here to our runtime virtual texture color texture, which is our material. So we simply click on the runtime virtual texture sample and come to the virtual texture, and we're going to choose our RVT material, which is our color information. And you'll see it automatically changes our virtual texture content to the YCOCG version, which is a bit more high quality. And now we need to set our material attributes. Like I indicated before, if you've got this kind of setup in your output for your for your landscape shader, you can simply go ahead and just drag these into each of them. That's corresponding to this output, but I'm not going to do that. So I need to drag off here and just type set material attributes. We don't need to do that. And essentially, the get material attributes is getting our information. And now we've got our information here, we've got our color information now set in our texture. We need to then apply the color information to our landscape shader still. So this works the same way as the get material attributes. You just hit the plus icon. We've got base color, we need specular next. Then we need roughness next. And then we need normal. And for our world height, you could leave it empty if you want, but I still want our landscape shader to have the world height. But we don't have anything for that. So what I'm going to do is use the world position offset. We may be using that a little later on in the series. For this, I'm just going to choose opacity. Because we're not going to use opacity just yet, I'm going to set this to use opacity. It doesn't really matter so long as you've got an output for the world height. So I'm going to drag base color into base color, specular into specular, roughness into roughness, and normal into normal. And we'll just drag the world height into our opacity output. Okay, so here's the moment of truth. Let's hit apply, and we'll apply all this information now to our landscape. In my experience, when you see this pixelated pink and purple ball, that it has worked. Funnily enough, but it has worked when you see that kind of ball. We're just going to save this as well. Make sure our work's always saved. Okay, so now we're saved. Let's go check it out. As you can see, our landscape's not changed that much. I can see the changes. You can see that it's quite blurry. That is it. Basically, like I explained earlier, our virtual textures are holding that information now. So when we turn the camera, the landscape needs to get that information again. As you can see that it's picking it up there, and it's just doing it well. So let's come to where we stored our RVT textures. We'll click import and RVT, and when you see the textures are like this, like your height is a grayscale image, that means your height information is working. And when you see this, the material texture is the color of your landscape, then you know that is working as well. What I want to do is double check that our information is working right. So I'm going to come to the outliner. I'm going to come to my material volume. If we click on the details, you'll see there that we've got the color information. We'll check the height out as well. We've got our height information and the texture there, which is great. We'll click on landscape, details tab. We'll just scroll down a little bit and you can see our color information, our height information is working. So this at the moment is RVT all set up on a landscape. Keep in mind, guys, like I said before, the quality is not great. It's stuttering a little bit because it's still compiling shaders in the background, which is completely fine. It will build itself shortly. Right, so I can tell by the clouds how they're all pixelated that it's building things in the background. We'll go ahead and save this real quick. Close our landscape shader off now. We're done with that. Let's just check the instructions first. The instructions are still the same. The base pass instructions are quite high, and this is why you need this kind of information storage using RVT. We're still compiling in the background. It's a real shame. Okay, so we'll showcase a couple of other things that we need to take into account. What do I mean by that? This is really crazy actually. It's taken quite a while to compile all these shaders. Even though it's not indicating it at the bottom here, it's still compiling, which is a real shame. Okay, so I can double click on our virtual texture material, and I'm going to increase this quality to maybe 2K. And I'm going to increase that by 1 to 512. I'm going to hit save, and this should set the quality up a little bit better. It's still compiling. That's because I've just changed it as well. As you can see, we're getting a bit of blurry imagery here at the side, which is fine. I'm going to click on the height and increase. We don't need to increase the height information actually. We'll just leave that set in stone. Okay, so that is that setup. Let's check our shader complexity. We're going to come down to optimization view modes and shader complexity. If you remember, it was all red before. It's still building, that's why it's taken a while, and there you go. Now it's gone from a completely red landscape here to a darker green, which essentially you can see at the bottom here on this tooltip bar that we're basically in between the VS, which is virtual shaders, and the PS. We're just basically in between them two, which is still quite good. I'm quite happy with that kind of performance, and we're just going to hit on lit here, like so. We're still quite performance heavy, which is a shame. It's obviously building something in the background. I'm not sure what, but it's still doing it somewhere. I'm going to hit save again just in case. A couple of things I want to showcase now is if we come to our Megascans folder, you may be importing certain textures. Let's go on here. You may be importing textures that are just normal. You can keep them normal if you want. That's completely up to you. Don't worry about this black shadowy thing here. That's completely normal. If you're importing your virtual textures and applying them, that's completely fine. The quality won't be great, but that's up to you. But if you're importing virtual textures and you're wondering why, like I showcased in the project settings, you had that enable virtual texture on import. If you're doing that and they're importing and you don't want them to be a virtual texture, just double click the texture itself. And we're going to look for this category here, textures. Yours will be like this maybe. If you just click the advanced at the bottom here, if you go to the bottom you'll see virtual texture streaming. If this is ticked, that means your texture is a virtual texture. And if you don't want it to be a virtual texture, just untick it. And that'll get rid of the virtual texture for you. We could apply this as a virtual texture and hit save. Like so. And it'll just make that specific texture a virtual texture. As you can see, the quality of the texture now is not great. But this is the caveat to virtual textures. As you can see now, I've got that VT on the texture as well. So yeah, I'm going to deselect that because I don't want it to be a virtual texture. So let's save. And now we're still jittering a little bit, which is not great. I don't know what it's building in the background. Maybe I've gone over my pool size. I'm just going to click play. No, I'm not. When I hit play like that, that will indicate to me if I've gone over my pool size for my virtual textures. You can see the quality is not the best quality of our virtual textures. Don't worry about that. That was just in the last video where we was testing our masks. Okay, so now we've got virtual textures set up on our landscape. Okay, so if you are, there's a couple of things. One thing I want to indicate now. If you're turning your camera and it's taken a while to build these virtual textures, this will have something to do with the pool size of your virtual texture. If you come to the command bar at the bottom and just simply type r.streaming.poolsize, you'll see it should pop up there. Here you can indicate how large you want your pool size to be. You could put 0 in here like that and just press enter, and that'll just totally eradicate you using a pool size for your virtual texture streaming. But I would recommend having a highly powerful machine for that, so your machine can handle virtual textures. As you can see in the background there, I've got all blurry textures. If I just hit enter here now, that essentially should sort all that out. But sometimes it can take a while to do that. That kind of stuff. As you can see, they are quite blurry, these textures. Let's reduce it. It's taking a while to build. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to come back to my virtual textures. Important, RVT. I'm going to come into the material and just reset these back to default. Like so. I'm going to hit save because that's obviously a bit too much. And now we should be seeing a bit better performance. It won't be just yet. As you can see, some of them are still blurry. It's affecting me quite badly, this actually. R.streaming. If you've already typed this in, actually, you just click on your command line, press up arrow on the keyboard, you'll see I've already got some commands here that I previously entered in. I'm going to click on this one, pool size of 5 million. Let's do that. 5 million is done in megabytes, so essentially that means 5 gig of virtual textures, which is quite demanding, but you would need a high powered machine. But yeah, as you can see now, we've applied virtual textures. There is something going on in the background with this engine, that's why it's taken why it's a bit stuttery. I'm not 100% sure on what it is, but it should catch up eventually. I may have to just save it. If you're getting this stutteriness, just save the engine, save your materials, quit out the engine and then come back in. and then it should be fine. It'll just build them really quickly then. But yeah, that is Runtime Virtual Textures for a landscape shader. If you found this video helpful, and now you've got Runtime Virtual Textures and you're a bit more performance better off, then leave a like and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video, guys. Thank you. Bye.